Thank you. The time is 28 minutes to 8. Some universities are going to go bust. That is the bleak warning on the front page of the Financial Times this morning. No final decision taken, the paper says, but a suggestion that the Treasury is not going to bail out the sector, as perhaps it will do with other sectors of our economy. Lord Willetts is on the line, former universities minister, of course, who oversaw quite a lot of the structure of the way universities are run at the moment, and Alistair Jarvis as well, who's the chief executive of Universities UK. Morning to you both.
Good morning.
Can I start with you, Alistair Jarvis? How serious is it? If there is no financial help, what happens?
Well, there is a very serious, very severe financial storm that universities need to weather. Government need to take urgent action to protect students, maintain vital research, and retain the capacity so universities can drive the recovery of the economy and communities. And universities at the moment, of course, are playing a really vital role in helping the NHS and communities to fight the coronavirus through testing, research into a vaccine, donating equipment, providing expertise. And of course, we should pay tribute to the thousands of brave student nurses working in hospitals. So the risk is really urgent. There's a real urgency. Government must act now and mustn't just wait to see what the damage.
But it is a risk, is it, of some institutions going bust, going out of business?
Yes, absolutely. If there isn't government support, there is this big black financial hole already, and the big financial hole will get worse as time goes on. And that could risk institutional failure. It could risk universities' huge contributions to the economy and local communities really lessening, and jobs will be lost, students will suffer, vital research will stop. So it's absolutely urgent.
Lord Willetts, what should the government do?
Well, I do think that universities do need help in the exceptional circumstances they're in, because one of the reasons they face this problem is they've been a great British success in attracting overseas students who are export earnings for us in reality. Those overseas students are unlikely to be travelling in the coming year. And it's the revenues that universities get from those overseas students that help, for example, fund the very research that you report on this programme. So it makes sense to plug the gap, because in the long run, I think British universities will remain very attractive to overseas students. And they really matter for young people here in Britain today, who, let's face it, are hardest hit by the virus epidemic. They're the ones whose economic prospects are most damaged. I think more of those will be looking to stay on at university, get to university, because there aren't going to be any jobs for them this summer. So we really need to maintain them so that they can support young people and boost their long-term prospects.
Alistair Jarvis, is one way of maintaining them, particularly the financially weaker ones, indeed possibly the academically weaker ones, is to tell the top universities, you may not now expand in order to fill the gaps left by those foreign students that Lord Willetts refers to. If they don't come back in the autumn, you may not expand and have more students from the domestic setup. Is that a proposal you'd like the government to take on?
Yes, absolutely. That would be one part of the package. But what's really important here is it needs to be a balanced package. It needs to include targeted grants for the most vulnerable. It needs to include support for the research base to retain research talent. It needs to include access to loans, and it also needs to include policy interventions such as the one that you mentioned. So it needs to be a balanced package. It's not
there's a
single
problem
blank
there,
check.
though, isn't there? That if you do that, and we think of Imperial College in London, the other big London colleges, a lot of our better universities have a big number of foreign students. If they are not allowed to match that with domestic students, they will be in considerable trouble, won't they? And it is, you think of Imperial in London, the last thing we want to do is to impose a sort of financial stress on that university.
So I entirely agree with that. That's why it needs to be a package of support. It can't be just a sort of one-off measure. It can't be one policy intervention. It needs to include support for those world-leading universities who are doing vital research to make sure that there is income that replaces that international student income to support.
I see. So you have fewer students, but you give them the income that they would otherwise have received. Is that the idea?
So you give some of the income to make sure that there is a protection, so they can carry on with that vital research. They can protect jobs. They can protect that talent. So it's a combination of some targeted financial support, but also policy interventions to ensure that some universities don't grow, and by doing that, put others out of business.
Lord Willis, what do you make of the growth issue, the domestic growth issue for some of our universities? Because they very obviously couldn't they?
They could. And look, in the old days, civil servants in Whitehall did used to decide how many students should go to each university. And I got rid of that. And I got rid of it because I thought if there were young people who wanted to go to university and had the capacity to benefit from it, and the universities that wanted to take them on, it wasn't for Whitehall to try to get in the way and decide how many people should go to each university. And although I understand the pressures in this immediate crisis, my fear is it would reappear as a long-term feature of the system. And we're back to the days when we had volunteers keen to get more education and the government standing in the way and restricting the numbers. So I believe in university autonomy, and I'm very wary of going back to the old system.
Final thought, if I may, from you both about specifically Chinese students and the business model, as it were, Alistair Jarvis. It is going to have to change, isn't it? We are not going to have the numbers of Chinese students that we have had.
So I think we have to think of a different future. I think that there is a risk that that students for a period of time may not travel in the same numbers. But we've got to make sure that we're as competitive, as attractive as possible when we come out the other side of this. So I still think that international students add so much to UK universities. They add academically, they add to the cultural diversity, and of course they bring huge income to local economies and local communities. So I don't think we should suddenly say let's give up on international students. We've got to make ourselves as attractive as possible out the other side of this. But yes, the world will be different, and we have to recognise that in the business models.
Alistair Jarvis and Lord Willis as well. Thank you both very much.
It's 22 minutes to 8, and let's take a look at the papers and news websites.